Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. I'm super excited to start making videos and content for y'all. If anybody has any recommendations on what games you want me running in the background, just let me know. I can play anything because your boy the goat. Without further ado, let's get this shit. Come on. Just a forewarning. I never have really engaged in any long form content like this before in my life, so just stick with me and try to bear through these growing pains with me. We about to be at this shit for a little bit. You feel me? But for some context, I thought it would be nice to kind of start a YouTube channel and just talk about life, things that I've learned in my 20 years of being here, some philosophies and ways of living that I've adapted to, and kind of just wanted to spread my truth a little bit and talk to anybody who's willing to listen, try to help out anybody that is in need of it. So yeah, this one is really about how I've developed as a person over the last few years, and how I've given meaning to my life, really given value to my life. You know, for a majority of my life, I've felt like I've lacked in certain aspects as a person. Like I'm less than what a human being is really supposed to be. For most of my life, I've been searching for something to fill this void, and I've done the usual, what everybody does. They turn to hobbies, certain addictions. But most importantly, I ended up turning to love, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But using these to fill the gaps in my character, it did work for a little while, short periods. But in the end, everybody knows they're never going to be truly satisfying. And throughout these years, I've learned that I'm pretty talented at a lot of things, but none of them really bring me satisfaction. Like none of them really set my heart at peace at the end of the night, if that makes sense. And one thing I'm not skilled at is, hiding that feeling from the people that are close to me. Yeah. No matter what I do, that part of me always seemed to shine through, and it always seemed to be pretty apparent that I was pretending somewhat in a lot of aspects, that I wasn't really all the way there. No, not to be all doom and gloom. I do want to say I've been feeling a lot more like a human being over the past year or so. Like I've really felt like myself nowadays. And I'm not really leaning on any more crutches, I would say. And this is definitely the most normal I've ever felt in my entire life. And with that being said, though, I still somewhat feel as if something, just a little something, is missing in me. And I have been trying rather hard to figure out what that is. And a realization that has dawned on me over the past few months is that I really just need to stop searching for that something, and I just need to accept what's present. And sometimes acceptance is really the strongest thing a man can do. Sometimes it's all a man can do. Quick pivot here, but I promise I'll wrap it back around. It'll make sense. For anybody that's a fan of JoJo's, so anybody with a beating heart and a brain, a functioning one at that, you're most likely familiar with Steel Ball Run and the protagonist, the GOAT, Johnny Joestar. While reading through Steel Ball Run, Johnny's character always stood out to me. I was a big Gyro fan at first, but Johnny's character definitely stood out to me throughout the entire story. He really resonated with me. His journey from a negative to zero, as he would claim, it spoke to my life a lot. Johnny even dubs this in the first episode. If you guys have watched the anime, he says, "This is the story of how I learned how to walk, not physically, but growing from youth to adulthood." And in a sense, I feel like I'm learning how to walk as well. I'm starting to feel like I'm no longer an outsider looking in. I remember my high school days when I was really struggling with my mental, and I had to talk to people. Uh, I often describe myself like I had a feeling of sitting back and watching my life pass by, like I was in a movie theater, in a dark room, just watching everything go by. And it was a really shitty movie at that. And I can attribute this feeling towards my own thoughts of, not belonging and self doubt. And over this past year or so, like I keep mentioning, I've been trying to, study more on psychology, find different paths of thinking. And, one complex that really stood out to me was imposter syndrome. And that's something I feel like I've dealt with for almost all of my life. Um, Living in fear that I don't actually deserve the things in life that I've been granted, that I'll be exposed as a fraud or someone less than the person that I've portrayed. I remember back when I first started playing football in middle school, I would always be so scared of running drills in front of my team. Like, I was never scared of the contact, though. I'd lay a nigga down. Don't get it twisted. I was always just terrified of messing up and getting ridiculed. And this process always kept me at the back of the lines, even though I felt capable. It was the same thing in school, too, and still is to this day. Even though I'm certain of answers, I'll never be the first one to raise my hand. I won't say never, but it's rare. But I mean, if you were to sit me down one on one and ask me who's the smartest person I know, I'd probably be top 5 in that list. But, these decisions to live at the back of the line, they've ultimately led to me feeling like I really wasn't living my life. And, add in some other issues, mental health, anxiety, and shit like that. That's where I've been located at for so many years, at negative, feeling sub. It feels like I've been a critique, a big one of my own life and not the one actually living it. And like I said, it was so easy to fill the void with screens and TV. I mean, who doesn't want to just binge watch fucking Fargo season 1? That shit's tough. Like, but it's so easy to fill your void with screens and smoking and even working your days away. But all this stuff is so temporary. And you'll soon see the benefits, they start to dwindle and the consequences, they start to rise. Not going out as much because I smoked and I wanted to fucking binge watch Dexter. Shout out my nigga Kyle Butler, actually the GOAT. But like I wanted to binge watch a show and I ended up just staying in all day. Or, I worked myself too much, to the point of fatigue that I didn't want to go out and have fun. That all I would do is lay around and sleep. And working too much, and ultimately resulted in me having back pain in my 20s, and I'm 20 right now, and when this first started about a year ago, I thought it was GG's. Honestly, I thought my life was done for. It's like, nigga, I'm 19. There's no way my lower back is cooked. I thought I could work and be cool. Like, shit, I'm not just gonna bounce back from this shit. But it was clear to me that I hadn't been taking care of myself, and especially my physical appearance. And really looking back at this, like, if you look at pictures of me from about a year or so ago, like, I was letting my hair grow out. I wasn't getting cuts. I wasn't shaving. Like, I wasn't really hitting the gym either. I was really just letting myself go physically. And I mean, depression had a lot to do with this, but nonetheless. Regardless, I pushed through the back pain. I was young. I said, I'll get through it. It'll go away. It didn't. So I finally, hit it on the head, went to the doctor, and they basically said, I had a shrunken little disc. Nothing too crazy. Some medication, some PT would clean me up in a few months. After that appointment, I felt so relieved. Like I really didn't have to be stressing over all this shit for so long. I could have just done this to begin with, just confronted my fear and just gotten it over with. And it was at this moment where I really started to change my way of how I go about life. I mean, it might sound silly, but it was kind of altering. Like, confronting the shit that worries you, it really is the best thing that you can do for your character. I mean, you either step up to that shit and you realize it wasn't as stressful as you thought, or you step up to it and you struggle with it. And ultimately, it'll make you a stronger nigga in the end. And it has taken me so long to get to this way of thinking. And to be fair, the back problems was definitely like the biggest part in the past like few months or so. But what's really gotten me thinking like this, the biggest catalyst for this was my over reliance on love. I've only dated one girl throughout my life, and I was through high school and my first year of college. And I'm not gonna bore you all with the details because who wants the details? They're overplayed. But she was overly good to me in a lot of ways, and I do appreciate the time we had together. Our relationship was certainly flawed. There's absolutely no doubt about that in my mind. But for the most part, I can say she was a pretty good partner, and above all else, I can definitively say she was a great person. I wasn't always overly dependent on her, but as time went on, I began to rely heavily on her for pretty much any sort of joy. Again, at this time, I really felt like a critic in my own life, so everything felt pretty shitty except for being with her, talking to her. None of my hobbies were fun or satisfying to me anymore. Only her. And she wouldn't even satisfy me half the time because I developed such otherworldly expectations of this person. We had dated for around 4 years, and again, last year or so of that was when I was really struggling with these feelings. And looking back, it was so clear to me that I had suffocated her and I had stunted her growth. But, most importantly, it became clear to me that I was depressed. And she eventually ended up ending things, and it felt like my whole life was crumbling. You know how it goes. My best friend was also extremely sick at this time with osteosarcoma, so it was really just bad timing by the planet. We had texted a little bit after that, and we had one more face to face because I didn't want her to see me all fucked up as her last time. I got her some flowers too, a little send off. It was her birthday around the corner. You know me, I'm a lover boy ass nigga. I can't help it. But I admitted to her that she made the right move by pulling the plug on this, and I had been feeling like this for a long time as well, and I couldn't make the decision myself because this was all I knew. This was all that I knew that could potentially make me happy. So looking back at this whole thing, the lesson is really clear. Like, you can't just let life pass you by. There's going to be hard choices that need to be made, and we as humans, we need to accept that. There are also things that we'll have no choice about, and regardless of how you may feel and how you may think about it, you have to learn to accept this as well. It's a part of growing up, and learning to flow with life, so to speak, has been working really well for me over the past few months. I've allowed myself to pick up new hobbies. I've gotten so much better in school. Like, this is the best I've ever been in school before. I've low-key gotten jacked, just slightly ripped. So that's pretty cool too. And it finally feels like I'm not watching a shitty movie anymore. It kind of feels like I'm living a shitty movie, which it might be shitty, but it's better, you know. And like, shitty things, they do still happen to me. And on paper, my life, I mean, I wouldn't be jumping for joy if I was randomly assigned this bitch. You know what I'm saying? But I feel better about myself, and honestly, that's what matters. It finally feels like I'm living, even though a lot of it sucks. In a sense, it really does feel like I've came from negative to zero. So I hope this video, this commentary helps a little bit. I hope my gameplay wasn't too buns, but go perpetuate some kind acts into the world today. Love you guys.